You know, we've been talking a lot lately about government cover-ups. Why would the government be interested in cryptic creatures out there, cryptozoology, cryptic creatures? And I came across this fascinating article that discussed this subject, and I found that not only is the government interested, but they've researched a lot of the cryptic creatures out there, the mysterious creatures. Back in 1947, the Philippines were being taken over by this rebel army. So the Philippines came to the United States and asked for assistance. The U.S. Army said that they would help. They kind of assessed the situation and decided if we send in troops, there's going to be a high casualty rate. But what they had found is in the Philippines, there is a kind of a mystical creature. It's a vampire, kind of like our Bigfoot, but it's a vampire. Most of the natives are scared of this vampire. The U.S. government decided they would send in 8 Special Forces guys. And what these 8 Special Forces guys did is they went into close to the rebel camp, and they would always go in at night, and they had created this special weapon that looked like 2 puncture wounds. They would grab one of the guards, basically get him in the jugular. The guy would bleed to death. They would go back out into the forest, hang him up so all the blood would drain out of his body. Then they would take his body back to where they had found it. The rebel army would find it, and they had spread kind of these rumors that this vampire was in the area. So the rebel army would back off from that area. They would kind of back off 20 miles from that area because they were afraid of this creature. Well, the Special Forces would go back in the next day, the next night, grab another guy, do the exact same thing, and then dump his body off. And pretty soon they got the rebel army to back off farther and farther and farther. And so the Special Forces of 8 men were basically taking over this island. They had taken back all of the strategic positions that this rebel army had left, had deserted.
Yeah, the psychological weapon, or psychological warfare.
Yeah, psychological warfare. And they basically had defeated this rebel army with just 8 Special Forces guys doing this, killing these soldiers that way.
Yeah, I can relate to that a little bit. When I was in the Army, part of my job was to go out. We were, cavalry, sort of a buffer between main line units and an enemy. And a lot of times what we were to do was to go out and make an enemy think, this is training, of course, but make them think we were the main force. That way, higher level commanders could maneuver, because we were not only seeing where an enemy was, but we were messing with them, making them think we were a big force. I'll give you an example. We had one time a whole British infantry battalion, about 500-600 guys, all their vehicles, and they would want to sleep in the evening time, so they would be moving into tree lines, setting up their positions. We had 2 armored personnel carriers and 1 tank. We moved so often through back and forth. We'd pop our, pyrotechnics, and we'd back up and take off down the line and come back out. So they thought they were against the whole battalion, and there were only 3 vehicles. So that's the whole idea is, trying to psych out an enemy to make them think there's something going on that's not going on, and defeats them oftentimes.
So 3 vehicles stood up against a battalion?
3 vehicles and 6 guys. We laughed our butts off.
That's awesome.
They were going to dismount the whole battalion when we finally got a call to take off and go somewhere else.
That's hilarious.
It was funny. I mean, they wanted that tree line so bad, and we just weren't going to let them have it.
Yeah.
But, that's an old trick, long time, that the government uses, whether it's military or, I suppose, otherwise.
So I got a good cover-up encounter for you guys that I wanted to play. A story about a guy that shot a Sasquatch, reported it. Kind of an odd cover-up. But let me go ahead and play the encounter for you guys, and then we can discuss more on government cover-ups.
I always carry a rifle with me whenever I'm not bow hunting. I carry a 243 rifle with me. I got up, parked the four-wheeler, got off the four-wheeler, and made about, went maybe 30 or 40 yards away from the four-wheeler. On the four-wheeler trail, I see quite a large human-looking footprint. So I'm looking at that footprint, and I just see one footprint, and I'm looking around, someone playing a joke or prank or something, what in the world is a pretty good-sized human footprint in the snow here? And I could only see one. I looked at it for a couple of minutes and kind of just shrugged it off like, find anything to explain it away from being a footprint. I took maybe 3 more steps down the 4-wheeler trail, and I happened to look on the bank on the other side of the 4-wheeler trail, and I see a second footprint. And I realize it's the opposite foot from the first footprint. So I went back to the original footprint, and I marked it off. It was 3 of my strides to the second footprint. And the second footprint wasn't a whole footprint. It was just the toes and the ball part of the foot. 3 more strides, and I could see then in the snow the trail of footprints. I'm like, who is up here barefooted in the snow? It's 15 or 20 degrees. I've hunted this area for 10 or 12 years and never had ever run across a person in the woods. Nothing. I'm like, I'm going to follow these, footprints and see who it is. So I follow them for probably approximately 100 to 150 yards. And it's winter time, so there's no foliage on the trees. All there is there's some little thickets that are still green. I get to close to a little thicket, and I can see that the strides have shortened quite a bit. They're not near as long as they were when I first found them. They're only about a stride and a half of mine now in between footprints. So I'm coming up on this little thicket, and I get within about 30 to 40 yards of this little thicket, and I hear a pretty heavy grunt. And I'm like, that's a darn bear. That's got to be a bear, because I've heard bears, grunt and snap their teeth when they're angry and stuff. And I was like, that's just a darn bear, So I took my rifle off my shoulder and engaged the shell. Got within probably 25 yards of the thicket, and I could see something in the thicket moving a little bit. It wasn't moving a lot, but I could see it looks like its upper body was moving, but not the lower part of the body. And where it was at in the thicket, I couldn't get a real good look at it, so I started moving around to the left of the thicket. It was hard to take me back to that day. Kind of rough. And when I did, it grunted again at me, and now I'm within probably pretty darn close. I realize I'm too damn close, for a bear, And I'll put the rifle up, and I'm gonna go ahead and shoot it. So I pull the rifle up, and I'm getting ready to shoot, and I hear something to the left of me, and it sounded like something like a bear climbing a tree. I mean, it sounded like something that was really grabbing the bark of a tree. And I looked to my left, and I thought that it was a cub that was with maybe this sow or this bear and had ran up his tree. So I swung around to the left to look, and looking dead at me at about 30 yards is about a 5.5 foot tall, hairy man. That's all I could say. And he's got one arm, he's about maybe 15 feet into the tree, somewhere in that ballpark, and he's in a V part of the tree, and he's got his right arm is wrapped around part of the tree, and his left arm is out, and I can see his whole chest and legs, and he's only holding on to the tree with one arm, and he's got one foot in the V of the tree, and his left foot is trying to just push against the tree, and I can see this individual as plain as day, and he's black, black fur, long hair on him, and it made me, I was so scared that I came close to vomiting. It scared me that bad. At this time, I look back to the little thing. I'm backing up away from this tree and the little thicket. I realize that something is telling me that you're in a bad situation. Your instincts or your second sense or whatever you want to call it is telling you need to back out of this situation. So I'm easing back, It didn't have what I would say big breasts, but I didn't see any genital, male genital to it. But you could see somewhat of an enlarged breast. But it was hairy. It was hairy, enough that everything wasn't that visible on the body. The one in the lower thicket stands up, and when he stands up, the lower thicket is probably 8 foot tall. And when he stands up, his head is above the lower thicket, and he's looking dead at me. And I'm easing back, and he's actually closer to me than the one in the tree is. So I'm backing up. Well, the one in the tree grunts at me. Well, when he grunts at me, I throw my rifle up and put the scope right on its chest, center mass of the chest, and I click the safety off and I let it go and busted it right in the chest. When I hit it in the chest, it didn't fall out of the tree, but it came out of the tree. After I shot it, I turned and started to run. And as I start to turn, I turn around and look, because as I turn, I have ejected that shell, and I'm putting another shell in it, because I think that I'm going to have to fire at the big one. And I turn back and look. The big one is kicking the small one off the ground. And I can't believe my eyes, what I'm seeing. So I turn around and I'm seeing this big one pick it up, the small one up, and it picks it up like it's a rag doll. Grabs it by its arm and just picks it up like, and this thing probably had to weigh 500 pounds. The big one, I would guess weighed 800 pounds, 900 pounds maybe. It was just a beast of an animal. Shaquille O'Neal don't have, it looks like a kid to this thing. So I turn, I see it, and I'm still wanting to get the hell out of there, And it turns and picks that one up, and it starts toward the rock cliff, the sheer cliff at the top of the mountain. And this big one, grabs this rock cliff with one hand and picks itself and I don't know if it's a mate or a sibling or I don't know what it is, and carries them both up this sheer straight rock cliff like he was, almost like he was flying. It was like he didn't even have no effort to it. Just went straight up this 30-foot rock face in a matter of 5 seconds. I don't know if it was 5 seconds. Turning the other direction, and my ass is I'm hauling tail back toward the four-wheeler, which I'm only about, at the time I was probably only 150 yards away from the four-wheeler, something like that. And I run as fast as I can to the four-wheeler, and I keep looking back over my shoulder, wondering if this thing is going to come. And get to the four-wheeler, don't even bother. I've got the gun in my hand the whole time. Start the four-wheeler up, and I never saw it again. So I called the game warden and told the game warden that what had happened, and I told him that I didn't think that it was a bear. That I was pretty damn confident that it wasn't a bear. It wasn't in my mind. There was no confusion. I know what bear look like. I've killed about 10 or 11 bear in my hunting time in the woods. 20 or 30 deer, bobcat, coyote. I know what the animals are here in this area, and what I saw that day, the day before Thanksgiving on 2003, was not a damn bear. Was not a bear. I don't care what anybody says. The people can mock, make fun, say I'm lying. I don't care what they say. I know what I saw on the day before Thanksgiving of 2003. Part of it is strange, but this part became even stranger. Called the fishing game, and they said, listen, we'll send the game warden out. Said probably tomorrow before he there. I said, okay. He shows up the next day about, it's Thanksgiving Day. And he shows up Thanksgiving Day around noon, because we just got done, we'd ate a early lunch before we was going to eat our Thanksgiving dinner. And he shows up. He's not happy that he's here at my place on Thanksgiving. He's like, buddy, let's get this done. I want to be home with my family too. I'm like, okay, it's what happened. I told him the story. Well, he starts writing down at first, and he's writing stuff down. And when I tell him about that, there's two of them, and that I believe it was a Bigfoot, he just stops writing, takes his notebook paper that he has, and just wads it up. I don't have time for this stupid shit. I want to be home with my family. You probably saw a bear. We get these reports all the time that people think that these things are out there. Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, hey, buddy, if that's what you think, it's fine with me. I said, I just wanted to make the report that I had shot an animal, in case another hunter finds something dead in the woods that I shot, and I have a bear tag, and that I can tag the animal if someone recovers it. So he's like, well, where did this happen? I said, it's up the mountain, probably about a mile up the mountain. He said, well, would you take me up there on your four-wheeler? I said, not a problem. He said, was there blood? I said, I don't know if there's blood. I said, when I shot the one in the tree, my ass was headed the other direction. I put the round in it and turned around, and all I done was turn around long enough to see the other one coming out of the thicket and pick the other one up, and then walk straight up a sheer cliff. I mean, just climb up a sheer cliff that no man without climbing equipment could go up, and much less carrying another individual that weighed at least 500 pounds up this cliff of 30 to 35, 40 feet straight up. This ain't a slope. This damn thing is straight up. And he's like, well, let's go. Take me to it. So we get on the four-wheeler and we get up there, and we stopped in the exact same location that I had stopped when the incident happened. And I showed him the footprints. He said, well, let's look. Where did these prints come from? And at the time, I didn't think about where they were coming from. I was wondering where they were born. So we tracked them back to where they had come from. And we went down the mountain, and finally the snow ran out, and it got into quite a bit of mud. And you could definitely see the foot. In the snow you could see them, but in the mud, these things were just beautiful. I mean, they were absolutely great footprints. If someone wanted to cast them, those were the casts to make a cast out of. The game was like, this ain't right. This ain't right. So he said, let's go back up. Let's go back up to where you shot this. Show me where you shot the animal. Like, okay. And I didn't have a firearm with me when we went. And I said, sir, would you mind, make sure you have a loaded weapon. I said, if we run across another one of these things, I said, I don't want to be in a situation where I'm unarmed. He said, don't worry about it. It's not what you think. I'm like, okay. So we hike back up, and we follow the trail of the footprints. That's where the little tick was at in the tree, and there is blood all over the ground in the snow. I mean, there's a good probably two or three puddles of heavy maroon, and it looked like long blood in the snow. And I'm like, see, I shot an animal here. But without doubt, I shot an animal. Well, he takes out a baggie that he has, and he's got a little thing around his waist, and he pulls out of like a Ziploc baggie, and he takes a handful of the blood in the snow, and he turns the bag inside out and grabs a snowball full of blood in the snow and seals it up and puts it in his back in his little sack there. And he said, well, show me where they went up the cliff, because you couldn't see because there was actually so many footprints. I guess where the big one had come out of the little thicket, maybe it looked like that the other one had been drugged a little bit in the snow before it actually picked it up and climbed up the cliff with it. And it handprint on the rock, that was blood. And you could see it pretty good. And he ended up taking a picture of that. He had a camera that he took a picture of that. And then, we couldn't climb over the mountain. I mean, it's a sheer cliff. And I said, the damn thing went straight up this. And he's like, well, there ain't no bear that can climb that. I said, you're not telling me nothing that I don't already know, sir. I don't want to sound like a smartass here, but I know what I saw and I know what I shot was not a damn bear, He's like, well, okay, if that's what you say, I believe you. I believe you. He said, you look pretty distraught and adamant that this is what happened. I said, well, I know what the hell happened. I don't have to prove it to you. If you believe me, that's fine. If you don't believe me, that's fine. That's your prerogative, your opinion, whatever. But I know what I saw. So he's like, well, take me back to my truck. He said, if anyone recovers a bear, we'll let you know. I'm like, okay. So we come back off the mountain, and he gets in his truck and leaves. He said, there may be someone else contact you over this. I said, from Fish and Game? He said, there may be another government agency that contacts you. I said, okay. And he said, well, who are they with Fish and Game? And he said, no, he said, it'll just be another government agency. He said, they'll introduce themselves if they show up. I'm like, okay. Which I thought was strange. He never left his card with me. Nothing. He leaves. So, probably it goes maybe a week, 7 to 8 days, something like that goes by, and I have a shop here in town, and 2 individuals show up at my work and ask to speak to me, and both are in a government licensed minivan, and they said, we need to speak with you. And I said, well, what's this concerning, And they said, well, it's over the incident with the game warden. And I said, okay. They said, do we have somewhere private that we can speak? And they said, we'd personally like to go to your residence and speak to you. I'm like, okay. I was like, well, it's almost quitting time. You can just follow me home. So I said, just give me about 30 more minutes, and y'all can follow me home. So I finished up my shift, and they followed me home, which was 3 or 4 miles from my work is where I live. And they get out of the car, and they called me by my name and said, we need you to recount what exactly happened to you on the day before Thanksgiving. I said, okay. So I go through the whole thing. And one of the gentlemen was a clean-cut gentleman, had a suit and tie on, was nice and polite. The other individual was a very large man, probably 6'8" or better, and he did not look like someone that would work for the government. He had long hair, kind of a scruffy beard, didn't look clean shaven. Wasn't clean shaven at all. Didn't look like a government employee would look. So he's a smaller guy. He gets done asking me a question, and I tell him the whole story about what happened. And then the larger man says, well, do you really think that you saw was a Sasquatch? He didn't say Bigfoot. The whole time I never called it a Sasquatch. I said that it was a Bigfoot. And he said, do you think you really saw a Sasquatch? I said, I'm 100% positive that I saw a Sasquatch. He said, no, you didn't. And he was blunt. No, you didn't. Yeah, I did. I mean, I know what I saw, and I'm pretty confident that's what I saw. He said, no, you're not understanding me. You did not see what you think you saw. And it would be in your best interest not to tell anyone else about what you think you saw. Upset me quite a bit. I'm not too tolerant to, someone telling me what I'm going to do. So I was like, well, I don't think that that's right. I know what I saw, and, I'm not, here to argue about it or anything. I know what I saw, and, he said, well, all I can tell you is be in your best interest if you forget the incident ever happened.
In 1977, the National Security Agency, and you can find these documents, they've been released through the Freedom of Information Act, but back in 1977, the government was actually researching and doing a study on Bigfoot, on Sasquatch. And what if as you read through the documents, it's pretty interesting. They say in there, what if Bigfoot were to be real? What impact would that have on the United States economy? What impact would that have on forestry? What impact would that have on logging? Would we have to protect these animals? And in there, they even discussed, what if it comes out that these creatures are more towards human, more than animals? What if someone shoots one? Is that murder? So it was really interesting to read through some of these Freedom of Information Act documents that have been released. And it's even more interesting that the National Security Agency was taking note of Bigfoot back in 1977.
Now, isn't it interesting? Why would they postulate, if something like that existed, what effect it would have on the economy? Now, that's what I've mentioned before, and I'm going to put in my book, Creek Devil, on a chapter dealing with possible cover-ups, are a couple of different theories about why they would do something like that. And one of those theories deals with, of course, the what I think is kind of the myth of the spotted owl, and it being either a test run to see what impact something like that would happen. If a species were, listed as endangered and logging had to be halted, what impact it would have on the surrounding communities. And it had a devastating effect. Of course, you guys live in a community that was hit hard by that. Or it could have been the actual vehicle to sort of take away that economy from those communities so that when the Sasquatch was proven, it wouldn't be as big an impact. I mean, I still think it'll be a huge impact, but I think that sort of softened the blow by kind of killing the logging industry. And, the thing that gets me is reading some congressional hearing information from, I want to say, 1990 or 91, and I'd have to look up the specific document. I have it somewhere here, but they were discussing this as all the various scientists and government officials, everyone, Forest Service involved with this whole spotted owl thing. And in the course of this conversation during this meeting, they were talking about a second species of owl that was plentiful that occupied the same habitat as the northern spotted owl. And to me, I mean, if the spotted owl was the only owl in that environment, yeah, I can see how if they died off, that would really change, the food cycle and everything in that environment. But it didn't. There was another species of owl, and they were actually discussing going out and killing this other species of owl to keep so the spotted owl could thrive. And
to keep the other one.
It didn't make any sense at all.
I remember that. They were actually going to kill one owl. They were going to kill one bird to keep another. Is what they were going to do.
Right. It's kind of silly. I mean, so so why even worry about the spotted owl? I mean, species, come and go. It's sad to say, but if your whole
I think what they were saying was the population was higher on the other one than it was with the spotted owl. But regardless, what is, like you're saying, what is the point?
Right. Well, their whole point was to say, okay, if we lose the owl, it's gonna have devastating effects on this ecosystem. Well, it wasn't, because there was already another owl there, also eating the same things, doing the same kinds of things. So, if the spotted owl died off, there would have been zero impact on that because this other owl was plentiful. So I had to think, okay, what were they really doing? And to me, it just seems that that would be a perfect vehicle to either blunt or test what the impact was going to be if the Sasquatch were proven real.
And, Will, I know we had that police detective that contacted the show. I know we're going to have him on here in the next couple of weeks. But while we're discussing government cover-ups, do you have the notes from when you spoke with him?
In the office he worked, they had a forest products deputy walked in and told him that he just left the Department of Natural Resources law enforcement meeting in Olympia, and that the lieutenant started off by telling the group about a Bigfoot sighting in Snohomish County the day before. I guess apparently the day before, so this was recent. The lieutenant told them that a woman and her grandson were on a short hiking trail and walked right up to a female Bigfoot on the trail who showed her teeth at them and growled. The woman ran back to her car and called 911. He said, I asked the deputy if he had the phone number from the DNR lieutenant. He did and gave it to me. I immediately called the lieutenant and advised him of who I was and that I was interested in Bigfoot, and he told me the name of the DNR cop who was assigned to the investigation. I I called the DNR cop who told me he was looking into this with an open mind, but he had not started yet. He advised that the information that he had was that the woman called Snohomish County 911, told him that she and her son had just seen a Bigfoot face-to-face on said trail and wanted to talk to someone. Apparently, the dispatcher laughed at the woman, and after a few minutes of getting information, referred her to the DNR enforcement office. Said woman then called and left a very detailed message to the DNR message machine. The officer told me that everyone at his office had heard the message except him, as he had not been there, but according to his coworkers, the woman was very upset in the message because Snohomish County Dispatch laughed at her and she was seriously suffering from anxiety due to the incident. And it was apparent in the message she left. He told me the location where it happened and said he would be going there later on that day after he listened to the message and called the woman. He told me that he would call me later that day and let me know what happened. I told him to give it to the woman my number and advised her that she could talk to me about the incident. He told me that he would. And he goes on, it got towards the end of my shift, and I had not heard from him, so I gave him a call. This was the detective talking to this DNR investigator. I called twice and left a message. About an hour went by, I called again. This time he answered. I asked him what he found out. He told me nothing. He said that by the time he got back to the office, the message had been erased from their phone system, so he had no way to contact the woman. I could tell in his voice that he was uncomfortable even talking to me. I asked him if he had contacted Snohomish County Dispatch, as they would have her information in the original 911 call recording. He told me that he would not be doing any further investigation into this, and then told me that he had to get off the phone as he was busy. The next day I called Snohomish County Dispatch, told them I was a detective from Mason County, I asked them about a complaint that had been filed on such and such date that was a wildlife complaint from said DNR park, which was referred to DNR, Department of Natural Resources. They told me that they had no idea what I was talking about. I asked to speak to the shift supervisor. I asked the supervisor if they had been working on the date in question. They told me that they had. I asked about the 911 call, and they told me that there was never any such call. After that, I tried to call the DNR cop back about 3 or 4 times. He never answered the phone or returned my call. Well, this was in the winter of 2010. That's from a police officer who, showed some interest in an incident. 911 calls, as far as I know, are never supposed to be erased because they can use those at any time in the future for legal cases and such. Because this was a Bigfoot incident, apparently these were erased from both the Department of Natural Resources and the original county dispatch office. So, this detective knew that there was a cover-up going on.
That's crazy. I've never heard of a 911 call being erased, and it's almost like it never happened.
Legal to. Yeah, I don't think it's legal to erase them.
I don't think it is either. But it's kind of like it almost never happened. They went through and erased everything and kept everyone quiet.
Exactly. See, and that's like before when I told about the 2 incidents that I was involved in back in the mid-1990s, south of Mount St. Helens over by Goldendale, with the tracks that were washed out, and over by Mount St. Helens, in that area where tracks were also, gone, and people in Forest Service uniforms who nobody else in the Forest Service seemed to know. So there are definitely things going on, things being erased, disappearing, whether it's an active, I don't know if it's an active cover-up at higher levels. It could be just local officials who, don't want the notoriety for their particular departments or areas. I mean, it's really hard to tell at this point because we don't know. There are things being covered up.
So, Will, we go out, we find a burial site, we dig it up, we find something. What do you think the government cover-up would be on that? Do you think it would be as big as an impact as actually finding a living, breathing thing?
Well, if we went out and, like I said, I know personally right now we're 8 in Washington, Oregon, where 8 sites are, and I have an idea where a couple more are on top of that. If we were to go out and take one of those apart and find a single tooth, and provided we were able to get wide enough exposure in the media so that they couldn't just come in and put a clamp on it, that would have every bit as impact as bringing an entire body in, because it's physical proof.
So what do you think about the economic impact of that? Could that be as large as well, do you think?
I do think it would be, because in some of the testimony, that congressional testimony I mentioned, they were discussing not just, controlling public lands, but there's some sort of a clause where they have, depending on the species and the impact and everything, without going into all the details, where they could even take over private lands. So that opens a whole can of worms right there. I mean, you start taking people's private property away, because that's the habitat of said species. Then you're talking some real issues.
So we go out there and we do that. We dig up these grave sites. Are we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot?
Well, it's possible, but it probably needs to be done.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
It's better to give it to I think the public should have it. The public should have that knowledge. We pay for those lands. We pay for the government. We don't work for the government. The government doesn't own us. It's supposed to be working on our behalf, those of us that are the public. So anything on those public lands belongs to all of us in this country. We all have a right to know what's out there. And if we know that and it's widely disseminated amongst the population, then I think it's for us, the public, to decide what's to be done with that.
I agree with you on that 100%. I know that us three have talked quite a bit about going out and doing some of these investigation on these burial sites. I'm getting pretty stoked about it, and I know Wes is ready to go. It's a matter of fact, are the people ready for it too? Because if we do find something, like you said too, if we find some bones, which I don't think bones would last that long, but I don't know. It depends on how old.
I think teeth would be what we'd find, and some bone fragment.
Right.
My anthropologist friend is going to send me some information on soil degradation of tissues and things like that. He says, and I agree, a lot of especially in the Northwest with the rain and everything and the sharply different weather, the seasons, and the way these piles are, the rocks that are piled, there's a lot of air and water can get in through these sites. And one of the sites that has some really good mounds, it has about 9 mounds in it, is old because it's covered with moss. And, it takes a long time for the moss to grow in some of those places. So I'm kind of thinking we'd almost need a fresher site. So whether any of these sites produce anything, I don't know. All we can do is go and look and see what we find and continue to look for more of them, because I know there have got to be more of them, and I have a pretty good idea where we need to look.
If the Men in Black decide to come out and hassle me and Woody, you better send more than 3 or 4. It's going to take a whole lot more than 3 or 4 you monkeys in a suit.
It was kind of my next question to Will was, he knows just about dead on where we live, Wes, you and I, pretty much within, 20 miles or something like that. Some of these sites Will was talking about are only 15, 20 minutes away from where we live.
Yeah, and, you guys are pretty close to, you're about...
Why don't we get our ass out there and go do it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, you guys are a couple hours from about 6 or 7 of them, and you're about 20 minutes from one good one. Just due east of you guys, there's an area where I think there are some other ones. We need to get in there at some point and look, but I think there's some in there. And those could be fresher sites.
I'm ready.
Yeah. I know you are. He's been on me more, Will, than I've been on him, that's for sure.
And this is a good time to mention to our listeners about our sponsor, where if we had a big turnout from our listeners to help us out with our sponsor, we would have the necessary means to go out and really look for, not only check the sites we know we have, but to search for newer ones and fresher ones and really put the issue to rest.
It was really cool of them to sponsor the show, and I recommend everyone, it's up on our Facebook, but it's audibletrial.com/Bigfoot Hotspot. You get a free book, and you just sign up for your free trial. It doesn't cost you anything.